Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm Alessio Sata, I'm the coordinator of MEDWET, the Mediterranean Wetland Initiative, the first Ramsar regional initiative for the Mediterranean. Let me welcome all the speakers to this webinar. Ms. Flore Lafay de Michaud is the new senior advisor of Ramsar Europe, representing the Ramsar Convention in this webinar, and also Karen Sudmayer Rio, sorry for the pronunciation, also representing UNEP and other colleagues. This initiative is a joint initiative between the Ramsar Secretariat, UNEP, and MEDWET. Actually, the aim is to put the importance of disaster risk reduction in wetland management and to highlight actually the issue of disaster risk reduction in the wetland conservation and management. So we will have a glance on how wetlands also can be on one side a fantastic tool for mitigation in terms of carbon absorption, and on the other side, especially we will point out the role of wetlands also in terms of adaptation and risk, and in particular risk reduction. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to see all this interest and participation. I see the messages in the chat, and people is joining from many different countries. I see from India, Sri Lanka, Montenegro, and many others. So we are very, very happy and excited to start this meeting, and I wish you a fruitful and intense exchange today. And I give the stage to my colleague Sana.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you all for your presence today in our webinar. I'm Sanem Zouri. I'm in charge of the MEDWET Managers Network. It's a network of about 50 wetland managers in the Mediterranean. I would like to draw your attention today to the fact that we have a simultaneous translation, so from English to French. And all what you have to do is to click on the button interpretation on the bottom of the screen. I would like also to inform you that we will have a certificate of attendance at the end of the session. And also the session is recorded, of course, if you all agree. So I will just present the objective of today. We'll share my screen. Okay, so the objective of today is to give an overview of the disaster risk reduction for wetland manager and policymaker on the issue, but also to understand and to have information about the guidance note available to them for incorporating DRR and wetland management plan. And as a result, we are aiming to have the focal points and protected area site manager understand the ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction and adaptation. And we also aim to develop an eco-DRR EBA recommendation for protected area management. And also we hope that wetland managers will be able after the session to implement better management plan with eco-DRR EBA and focal points report on it. And so in order to do so, our agenda for today will be as follows. We had the introduction from Mr. Alessio Sata, our coordinator, and now I will give the floor to Madame Flore Lafay de Michaud, which is the new senior advisor for Europe, and she will share with us the perspective of the Ramsar Secretariat.
Thank you so much.
Before Ms. Fleur,
yes,
I would like to introduce you. So, pardon. So Ms. Flore Lafay de Michaud holds a PhD in political ecology and master's degree in environmental science, with a practical work experience in environmental and water policy, flood management, coastal ecosystem restoration, and international cooperation. Fleur joined the Secretariat of Ramsar on the 15th June 2023, acting as the lead contact focal point for the Europe region and its 48 contracting parties, as well as taking a global lead role in supporting the Secretariat work in some thematic areas such as water and inventories. She's a member of the Secretariat senior management team. Fleur, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Sana. And I'm extremely pleased to be with all of you today. I speak on behalf of the Secretariat of the Ramsar Convention. And have you heard, I recently took over as a new Senior Advisor Europe. And I'm really delighted to provide this 5-minute introduction to this important webinar. And I would like first to thank and congratulate MedWet and UNEP for organizing this event. And here, namely, Alesso Sata, MedWet Global Coordinator, and Mrs. Karen Sudmeyer-Rieu, who will take the floor in the event, and also Michael Fernandez from the Disasters and Conflicts branch of UNEP. I wanted to maybe have a few words on MedWet, because I think it's an extremely productive Ramsar regional initiative that aims at the effective conservation of the functions and values of Mediterranean wetlands. So you all know MedWet, but I would like really to emphasize that it plays a very crucial role in concretely assisting Ramsar sites managers across Mediterranean countries. But not only that, it also strategically works hard to provide reliable and replicable solutions to policymakers, from national to local ones, that will finally encourage the financing of wetland conservation and restoration actions. So I wish here to pay tribute to these important contributions to the work of the whole convention. And yes, the potential of wetlands for disaster risk reduction is indeed huge and really deserve such an event today. You know, as you know, the water-related hazards, so flood, for instance, but also other types of hazards account for more than 90% of global disasters. And wetlands can really act as natural infrastructure that are far more cheaper than hard infrastructures. For example, mangrove projects are costing from 2 to 6 times less than submerged breakwaters. But what is interesting with natural infrastructure is that they also provide other benefits for human well-being and also for other types of ecosystem services, like providing food or other type of material for livelihoods. So these benefits make wetlands even more key for disaster risk reduction, in the sense of they are very much useful for communities to recover faster. For example, protecting essential food sources as rice paddies or other croplands also help communities to recover quicker and better after a disaster. So that's why in 2015, parties to the Convention on Wetlands have committed to integrate wetland-based disaster reduction and management into national strategic plans through the adoption of the Resolution 1213. And so in recent years, growing numbers of governments are integrating wetlands into their disaster risk reduction policies. And prompted by that resolution, and with the help of the Ramsar Regional Center for East Asia, as well as UNEP, there had been some work being done to develop a guidance to offer best practices for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. And so we have been delighted to support the development of this guidance and hope that this will support many wetland managers in their important work. And I would like here to mention Dr. Ritesh Kumar, who is a current member of the Scientific and Technical Review Panel and who has been a long leading pillar for this work of the Convention on Eco Disaster Risk Management. I would like maybe to mention quickly two streams of work for the Convention that are also connected to these aspects. One is the resolution 1417 that had been adopted in Geneva in November last year on the protection, conservation, restoration, sustainable use and management of wetland ecosystems in addressing climate change. And so this resolution will prompt governments, parties, and MedWet will support that work to better invest in nature-based solutions and or ecosystem-based approaches for addressing and accompanying climate change impacts. There is also a new line of work of the STRP, so the Scientific and Technical Review Panel for the triennium 2030 to 2023, sorry, to 2025. And there will be briefing notes and technical reports that will be out in the next 3 years, related one on updated information on climate change and wetlands. So for example, the projected impacts on climate change on the world's wetlands and responses. And second, the development of a guidance on prioritizing coastal blue carbon ecosystems for conservation and restoration. So with all these, I really encourage you to make the most of this webinar, to put the recommendations in practice, but also to come back to us, either MedWet or the Secretariat of the Convention or UNEP, to share in the future your experience with its successes, but also maybe its limitations, so that we could gain from your lessons learned and better develop this approach of wetlands-based disaster risk reduction for the benefit of the whole community of wetland managers. Here, I wish you all a fruitful session and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Fleur. Thank you for giving us this perspective of the Ramsar Secretariat. And now we will move to Ms. Karen Schumeider-Rieu, who will give us a presentation about the nuts and bolts of incorporating disaster risk reduction in your wetlands management plan. But before that, I would like to introduce Ms. Karen. So Ms. Karen is an expert on nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction, with 2 decades of experience researching, teaching, and publishing on the topic. She works with the United Nations Environmental Programme, the UN Convention on Combating Desertification, the World Bank, and other international organizations to support the technical and outreach program on nature-based solutions. Prior to this, Karen was a senior advisor Senior Advisor Disaster Risk Reduction with the United Nations Environmental Programme Disaster and Conflict branch in Geneva, Switzerland. I will stop and give the floor to Ms. Karen.
Thank you very much, Sana, and thank you, Alessio and Azraq, for your opening remarks. I'm very happy to be here today. And let me make sure that I'm sharing my screen properly with full screen mode first. Can you please confirm, Sana, that it's looking good?
It's not on the full screen mode. Can you just... it's fine, it's fine. So
it's now?
All is good.
Okay, very good.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have 15 minutes basically to give an overview of the topic in a bit more detail on why wetlands matter for reducing disaster risk. Now, many of you are wetlands experts and are wetlands managers. And so many of the things I might be saying may be already new to you, may be very well known to you. For some people, it might be a little bit new. But one thing is I want to share some resources that might be useful to you that will give you more in-depth information into including disaster risk reduction concerns into your wetlands management plans. But let me start by giving a quick, finger on the pulse. What is happening? Well, what you're seeing, and as Flora was saying, water-related disasters are the majority of disasters today, either too much water or too little water. And this is where wetlands play an important regulating role. Why should we care? Well, I think many of you already know that, but let me give you a few more examples that you can use later on if you need to convince policymakers or others of the importance of wetlands in the solutions to reducing disaster risk. I'm originally from the United States, currently living in France, and I have an example here from my homeland of Houston, Texas, before and after Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Now, this is an area that has a long history of extreme rainfall events. It's actually known as America's flooding capital. And these flooding events are getting stronger and stronger, more frequent in recent years. Now, this is an area that was flooded by a huge, this tropical cyclone. And why? Well, it's a combination of several factors. Climate change, for me, is an aggravating factor, but it was not the main cause. This is also an area that is known as the Wild West of development, where the urban area has spread out and has destroyed prairies and wetlands. So this is really the main reason for the flooding, is the destruction of wetlands and the destruction of the buffering capacity that wetlands have. And then climate change is acting to aggravate. So let's not be fooled. When we see in the headlines that climate change is the main driving factor behind disaster events, let's think about how we are draining our wetlands and paving them over and causing disasters by our development practices. So another example, a little bit better example, is one from Colombo in Sri Lanka. This is an area that has severe water problems. The city faces increasing risk of disasters, devastating floods. And since severe flooding in 2010 has exposed the city's vulnerability to shifting patterns of rain, certainly linked to climate change, but also the fact that the city is built in a low-lying river estuary has, of course, aggravated the situation. So in this case, there was something that has gone right. This area was, since 2012, there has been a World Bank funded project called the Metro Colombo Urban Development Project. And I see we have several participants here on the call from Sri Lanka, which is fantastic. The hybrid infrastructure that was developed combines wetlands conservation with a package of gray infrastructure development. So it's an area that utilizes wetlands as green infrastructure to complement a gray infrastructure investment package. So this seems, from what I've also met one of the main architects of the system, and according to him, it's still working. Maybe we'll hear from the Sri Lanka participants if they're still happy with the system 10 years after it's been implemented. But it also has provided co-benefits, which is something that Flo has mentioned. Also providing green areas for recreation, but also for livelihood support. So key lessons: if we're working against nature, we will have increased flood risk. When we're working with nature, we're most likely to decrease our flood risk. So nature can be a powerful ally in disaster risk reduction, and in particular wetlands, which is the topic of today's discussion. So let's keep in mind that disasters are not natural. We are the creators of a lot of the causes underlying disasters. Now, hazards can be natural, such as rainfall events, but disasters are not. And even some people are questioning whether our hazards are natural because of how we humans have affected the climate. Many hazards are now becoming more frequent and higher in magnitude. So this is what Flora was referring to, is that disaster events are on the rise, and many of them are water related. Now, how was disaster risk created? We typically look at, let's say, three main causes of risk. The hazards are the rainfall event. It can be the landslides. Exposure, this is where people are living, right? So if people are living like in Houston in areas that are close to a river, they are more exposed. Vulnerability, these are the socioeconomic factors and also housing conditions that make people more vulnerable. And then we sometimes add a fourth component, which is, do we have the capacity to manage the hazards, right? Do we have the capacity to manage the floods, for example? I won't talk about all of these boxes. Hopefully these slides will be shared with you, but it's important to know that wetlands can contribute to reducing all of these main dimensions. And by even reducing one of them, we're reducing risk. I'll come back to that in a minute. So let's really be careful when we consider that climate change is a main driver of disasters. Environmental degradation is definitely up there. Biodiversity loss, dried up water bodies, pollution, etc., fragmented wetlands. These are things that we have control over, right? Whereas the climate change that is out there and the aggravated hazards, we cannot directly control, but we can control environmental degradation if we have the will to do so. And these are leading to increased hazards, loss of livelihoods, increased vulnerability, scarcity of food and water, which leads to increased disaster risk. So how can ecosystems help to reduce disaster risks? Well, ecosystem-based approaches, we can use the term eco-DRR. We're also hearing the term nature-based solutions. This was also mentioned. We consider eco-DRR to be a subset of nature-based solutions. So in this talk, I will mainly use eco-DRR or ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. This is sustainable management and conservation and restoration of ecosystems, including wetlands, for reducing disaster risk with the goal of building the resilience of human communities, but also biodiversity. So how can wetlands contribute to reducing disaster impacts? Here again are those three words, right? By reducing the impact of hazards, right? So if we have mangroves, if we have wetlands, we have meandering rivers, these can actually absorb some of the energy and buffer against the excess rainwater or the storm surge, right? So the actual ecosystem can actually absorb some of this energy and absorb water. It can also reduce exposure to hazards. So if we have a green belt, or if we have a wetlands that protects the people between the people and the sea, for example, and rather than people living right on the edge of an area where they might get flooded, this actually reduces their exposure by creating a physical barrier between excess floodwater and people. And third, by providing the co-benefits, by reducing vulnerability, both before and after disasters. So this is also what Flora mentioned. There are many co-benefits, right? And you are many of the managers of wetlands. So keep in mind, not when you speak with policymakers or if you're looking for additional funding, that you provide these arguments. Not only are we reducing the risks, we're building resilience through ecosystem services. I won't read them all out, but of course we all know water purification, regulation, food, habitat, etc. Now, you took a small quiz before you entered this, this webinar, and as Sana mentioned, you will take the quiz again to receive, I think you'll mention that later, Sana, to receive your certificate. Some of the answers are in my presentation, so listen up here. Now, beware of oversimplification. We shouldn't just say that ecosystems will protect all against any kind of hazard at any time. But by creating pockets of where water can go in our upper air, in our upper landscapes, in our upper watersheds, we can slow down the water, creating benefits in the upper watersheds so that water does not go down to areas where it's not wanted. In other words, flooding cities, for example. So it's important to consider where are the wetlands located, the conservation ponds, what are the sizes of them? What is the wetlands health? Wetlands management issues, for example, are all wetlands functions maintained? Some of these questions will be there, and policymakers may ask you, well, don't wetlands cause flooding? Don't wetlands overflow sometimes? And so these are questions as technical experts that you need to be ready to answer with regards to your wetlands in terms of how does your wetland react when there is a huge rainfall event? And how could your wetlands better function for reducing flooding and also for reducing drought, which is something that we'll hear from our next speaker. Now, Flora mentioned the important resolution. It was no longer a draft, it's now a final resolution that was voted through and submitted by the government of the Philippines. And this has really helped to bring attention to disaster risk reduction as part of obligations that governments should recognize. I just want to show you some resources that you can access. Now, I know that these resources are not from the Mediterranean basin, but this one is from Japan. This is a source, a new document that came out by Wetlands International Japan, which gives many examples of how wetlands can function in the present and how they function in the past for reducing various types of disaster risk. So here we're talking about flood control, but also other functions such as habitat and education. Here is an example from India. We were fortunate to work with Wetlands International in Odisha, India, in providing some support, thanks to the donor of the EC in Tampara wetland, where we developed a case study for 3 years, working with them to see how this wetland could improve the regulation of water flows, climate regulation, and act to buffer storms and cyclones from the nearby ocean, as well as many co-benefits in terms of groundwater, fish, tourism, and increasing habitats. Now, unfortunately, we will not show a video that we have developed. I think it's there, but you can find this video on our website. You can simply Google UNEP EcoDRR India, and you can see this video. And I think you can find a way of putting captions in different languages, but we will not play it today. I want to just almost close this talk by talking about that it's important that you also can demonstrate the economic benefits of wetlands. This one here shows the benefits of the Tampara wetlands area and another area that Wetlands International was working with us on. This shows net present value in different discount rates, which I will not talk a lot in depth here. The main thing is to show you that let's look after 6 years with a moderate estimate. This project has increased its benefits by $7 million as compared to how much money was spent on the project. After 10 years, we're up to around $13 million in benefits to the local communities from the wetlands restoration works. So please look for local examples you can use to talk to policymakers about this. So I will end by telling you about this new guide that was published in 2022 in cooperation with the Ramsar Convention, with the Southeast Asia Regional, Regional Training Center, with Wetlands International, and with funding from the European Commission. And it really gives you a step-by-step guidance for incorporating disaster risk reduction in the wetland management cycle. it mainly talks about management planning, management and monitoring, evaluation and review, and wetland site description. And it goes through exercises that you can use. Ideally, we would have had a 2-hour session just on the wetlands guide, but today it's mainly an introduction to this guide. Here's a quick overview of this, including disaster risk reduction stakeholders in your wetland management planning may not be something that you typically do, but something for you to consider. Evaluating wetlands ecosystem services and benefits is important. Formulating management objectives, preparing your action plan, communicating, capacity building, and participating in the management action plan. And then finally, coming up with a risk-sensitive wetlands management plan is the overall goal. So finally, I invite you to join our MOOC, Massive Open Online Course, on the topic of nature-based solutions for disaster climate resilience. It'll be closing soon, next month, so please take a look. And with that, you can find also how to sign up here. We'll put the link in the chat. And with that, I end with a beautiful photo from the Camargue in France, where I live, which provides many opportunities for wildlife, for buffering from storms, and something that we all need to protect. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for this interesting global overview on wetland and disaster risk reduction. And now we will move to the Mediterranean with Mr. Hazem Haresha, who will give us a presentation about managing climate risk restoration work in the Azraq Reserve in Jordan. But before you start, Hazem, I will give you an introduction about you. So Hazem is a wetland manager. He's part of the MedWet Manager network. So he's as I said, the manager of the reserve of Azraq. He has more than 12 years of experience in wetland management and restoration. He's leading the management planning process of the reserve based on the international standards according to the guidelines of the IUCN. They succeeded as a group in restoring the 10% of the Oasis. But I will give you the floor so you share all this interesting information. I personally been in the Azraq Reserve, which is a really nice, very interesting reserve to visit in Jordan. Hazem, the floor is yours.
Thank you all. I am really happy to be with you in such a fruitful webinar today. And I will give you a presentation about Azraq Wetland Reserve as one of the MedWet network. Okay, so as you know that Azraq Wetland Reserve, it was an oasis in the eastern desert of Jordan. It's, by the way, located on the largest drainage rechargeable aquifer in Jordan, and it's, by the way, located on the transboundary aquifer. So we are sharing the same aquifer, okay, with Saudi Arabia and Syria. So, but the vast majority of the aquifer can be located in the Jordanian territory. So it was a natural springs, okay, of Azraq Wetland Reserve that used to come out and form the whole oasis. And Azraq, by the way, it was established in 1978, after 1 year of Ramsar Declaration. And the wetland is the first Arab wetland to join Ramsar. That was in 1977. It was really it was described by all the explorers and other like people passing through the wetland as a paradise. So it was full of water, full of life, and now the ecological situation degraded significantly because of over-pumping, over-extraction of water. So we are working on now according to the management plans of the reserve. So I think we have like seventh management plan so far in the reserve. Now we have the last one is valid to 2025. So we are working on 5 years management plans, and now we are working on implementing the goals and the work plans on the each management plan. So we shifted because we started as a concept in 1965 as Azraq National Park. It was a huge project, but it doesn't, by the way, exist because of the political situation at that time. And we continued with our work on the, I think also the management plans here, they are different from the 60s to the 80s, and there are some drastic changes in the wetland. So up to the 80s, there was no problem because there was no pumping to the largest cities in Jordan, like Amman, Irbid, and Zarqa. They are like more than half of the population of Jordan. Okay, next. So this is the Azraq Aquifer. So the aquifer is a very huge one. It's more than 7.7 thousand square kilometer, extending from Syria, the highest relief of the aquifer in Syria, and the most recharge of the aquifer happens in the Syrian territory, although it's only 5% locates in the Syrian territory, and the vast majority of the aquifer, like 94%, in Jordan and 1% in Saudi Arabia. This is the map of the reserve. So we are in the blue one. This is the core area of the reserve, and we expanded the reserve from 12 square kilometer to 74 square kilometer, and we have also to include the adjacent large mud flat, which is part of the environmental situation in Azraq. And also today we are witnessing a flooding of major wadis from different parts to the mud flat. So it's full of water now, and it's part also of risk disaster to have a wetland, because it's working like a sponge. So they absorb a lot of water. The mud flat is a very important part in Azraq that make to reduce the disaster in the area. So this is the Azraq Aquifer, okay, and the map of the aquifer. And also it's very important that in Jordan, because it's, by the way, giving a lot of like water quantities to the cities. So more than like 65 million cubic meter pumped to different purposes, for agriculture, for working, for drinking purposes, also for other industry or tourism. Here's the mud flat. Now it's full of water. It's in total, it's 75 square kilometer. It's attractive point for migratory birds. Thousands of birds invading the area during the flooding season. Now, by the way, the flooding came in the wrong time, because now it's not the time for the migration. So that's why now, because of the I think started, we witnessed that some of the impact of climate change on the area. So that's why we received unusual rain and also flooding from different parts in Jordan. So and as you know that Azraq adjacent or Azraq mudflat is the lowest point in the aquifer. So that's by the way let all the water coming to the mudflat, and now it's full of water. In the early 90s, all the springs disappeared because of the over-pumping, over-extraction of water from the underground water. And as I mentioned before, that in the early 90s, up to the 80s, there was no problem because the recharge amount of the aquifer was 24 million cubic meter. And the discharge was around like 20 million cubic meter as it was defined and by the government, the safe yield to be only 20 million cubic meter and 3.5 million cubic meter for agricultural purposes. But because of the increasing demand on water and also aftermath of the Gulf War and the migration of people, the Jordanian expats traveling back to Jordan, so affected significantly on the water table and the water quantities. So that's why led to this, to the that all the springs now dried up. After the dryness of an oasis, we aimed at getting like a restoration project. Now it was funded by UNDP and GEF, a global environment facility. So we started Azraq Oasis restoration project, and we aimed at restoring 10% of the former oasis after the total dryness of an oasis. So, and also to halt further degradation of the aquatic ecosystem in the oasis. And also to, in the same time, to conserve and protect Aphanius sarhani fish, and also to provide and develop sustainable programs in the field of ecotourism and socio-economic development linked to the concept of nature conservation. And at the end, to establish like a sustainable basis for the utilization of the water resources in the Azraq Basin. Here we started how we get water now, and Jordan, as you know, is the poorest country per capita. So we signed an agreement with Water Authority of Jordan, the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, in order to provide the wetland with 1.5 to 2.5 million cubic meter per year in order to maintain only 10% of the former oasis. So here, like, I will give you some like historical background. So in 1998, we are getting back some of the biodiversity to the reserve, especially after the finishing the restoration project. So we get some of the water buffalo from the local communities in Azraq, because in Azraq we have 3 social groups. We have a Druze, Chechen, and Bedouin. So we get the all the social groups here in Azraq, and also Chechen used to bring water buffalo with them. So we get some of the water buffalo back to the oasis. Also, the restoration done and also handed over to the Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature. And since then, it was under the management of RSCN. In 1999, we started with the notion of socio-economic projects. And also now we have like 13 ladies working on different handicrafts, like painting over ostrich eggs, or packaging, silk screen typing, or other like handicrafts. 2000, we started conducting a Fanus Sarhani survey. And as you know, it's the only endemic vertebrate species of fish in Jordan. It's endemic to the Oasis. And it first, by the way, found by 3 Austrian researchers, Volvock, Scholl, and Kropp. They also classified this kind as a Fanus. And Sarhani, because Wadi Sarhan passing through the Oasis. In 2000, also, the first bird census were conducted even under the GIF project. Here some photos of the rehabilitation in Azraq Wetland Reserve. Here we use like bulldozers, we use some like heavy machineries in order to make leveling, and also to open the water pools. We didn't, by the way, reinvent the wheel. We only get satellite images from the 60s, and also local community also assisted us, by the way, defining the old pools. So we didn't create pools, only cleaning and start pumping back to the Oasis. Some also, I share some of the, also here we have some reintroduction of Azraq Killifish. Azraq Killifish after the total dryness of an Oasis, it was at the brink of extinction. We get some of the samples of the killifish, and we made captive breeding using like concrete pools. And after we succeeded to breed them by artificial way, so we started to make like trial pools, and we introduced first 350 individuals to the nature, and after that we succeeded to have now endless number of killifish. Now this is, by the way, after a while of rehabilitation, how greening starting or landscape will be changed by over time. Here also we expanded the reserve. Now we have up to 2017, we used to have only 12 square kilometers of the wetland, and now we expanded the reserve to 74 square kilometers, and we included the mud flat, which is seasonally flooding, and nowadays it's full of water because the unprecedented waterfall over the past 2 months. And also we now included all salt extraction areas of the local people. Now it's within the reserve border. So in total now we have 74 square kilometers. Here the killifish. The killifish is one of the most important programs now we are working on. We expecting that in 1st of August, we will conduct a survey on Azraq Killifish. The project started 2000 up to now. It's a sustainable program now in the reserve. Here, by the way, part of the surveys on the killifish and also the concrete pools that we built to make breeding for this kind of fish. Here also another program in the reserve. It's very important program, bird ringing. It's very important in the reserve. And now Azraq Wetland Reserve, maybe it's the only site in Jordan to have bird ringing in the reserve. More than, and also 2/3 of Jordanian birds record in Azraq. So more than 350 species of birds in Azraq out of 437 species recorded in Jordan. So 2/3 of the Jordanian registered or recorded in Azraq. It's a very important site for migratory birds. We have a lot of biodiversity. I will not go deep down in details, but a lot of biodiversity in the area, especially after the rehabilitation. So we made a green spot and a wet area for many biodiversity that used to inhibit or depend on this area. Here the water buffalo program also in the area, although it's invasive species, but now we are using this kind of buffalo as a management tool now in order to open trails during between the reeds, and also to control the area by grazing. We direct water buffalo to graze in some areas that we need to eat the shoots of the reeds. This is also after the rehabilitation, we are working on water monitoring program. Now we are making some like water log, and we are taking testing water quality for the TDS, pH, and chlorine, oxygen, or other like water characteristics. So it's very important to monitor now the water to see the suitability for the organisms they are living in these water pools. Here also, it's part of our wetland now to prevent attacks or any like environmental problems like poaching or grazing or other like problems that are like fire, sometimes fire in the summertime. So that's why we have law enforcement and patrolling team. They are following up with local community, and also because we are very close to the residential areas. So we need to raise awareness of people towards the nature, the protection of wetlands. Here also, after the rehabilitation, we developed some ecotourism program facilities in the wetland. We built visitor center, bird hides, and wood walks for the visitors, and we open new trails, hikes, some other like programs, ecotourism programs in the site.
Azam, sorry, allow me just to interrupt you a second, just to inform the audience that we will not have interpretation in French starting from now. So we will be just in English, and then we will have the discussion in French and English. Sorry, and please go ahead.
Okay. So the ecotourism activities were developed and the facilities as well. All the tourism infrastructure now will developed in the Azraq Wetland Reserve, from the visitor center, from the bird hides, to let the visitors know more about the wetland and the historical background about the wetland. It's very important site in the Eastern Desert, and maybe it's the only wetland in the Arabian region, like in the desert. So it's very important to have such a wetland in Jordan, and that's why we developed a lot of ecotourism activities, and we developed also experiential tourism, engaging local community from Azraq to be involved in the day-to-day activities of the tourism. And also we have cycling, we have bus tour, we have different activities now developed in the area. Even we have a lodge. Now we have Eco Lodge in Azraq. It was also developed and opened under the royal patronage. That was in 2008. It serves like food and beverage, accommodation, and other like activities for the visitors of the protected areas. Because in Azraq we have three protected areas. We have Dahik, we have Shomari Wildlife Reserve, and Azraq Wetland Reserve. So it's the Eastern Desert is very rich with biodiversity and also protected areas. Here's some of the activities we are working with the local community to serve like traditional cuisine for the visitors and other like people visiting the area. Here it's very also important program in Azraq Wetland Reserve. This is, by the way, the environmental education program, and we are now developing a nature night program. They are targeting school students from 12 to 16 years, and also we need to create a generation connected to the wetland and to defend, advocate the Azraq Wetland Reserve. And this is, by the way, a very important program now. It consists of 5 stages. And at the end of the program, you will get a certificate of Azraq Killifish, and also they will be like specialized in different like units in the reserve. So he can choose what he will be responsible for. So that's the notion of the program. And we have also we are celebrating World Wetland Day in the 2nd of February every year, with different like stakeholders, influential people, and other like people in Azraq, and also some other environmental institutions. Here also we are developing nature conservation clubs in the schools. So we are targeting school students to raise awareness. It's very important now to even we have some projects targeting housewives in order to in terms of water consumption. So they are responsible for water consumption, and we are distributing like water saving devices. And also we are making, sometimes we with other like companies working in the field of maintenance of the water network. Here, part of the activities we are working with the school students. So we made like bird watching clubs, and also we are testing water. We let them know about the water characteristics and biodiversity and other like activities. Here,
Hazem, sorry,
yeah.
because we don't have interpretation, so can you just reduce a cut to make it shorter, that we can have some question in English and French, so everyone can understand?
Okay,
so,
yeah. We are, by the way, we are about to finish.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Here, the outreach program, we are targeting locals, targeting government decision makers or stakeholders or other people to be supportive for the wetland. And this is, by the way, the socioeconomic projects. Here, as I told you, that we have ladies working on different handicrafts. Azraq Wetland Reserve joined Ramsar in 1977 and also joined the Green List from 2018 to 2023, and we get top 100 sustainable green destination into 2022 and best success story in the world 2023. And we were named as Peace Park by International Institution for Peace through Tourism. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Hazem. Thank you for this impressive work. As I was saying, I visited this site, and it's a very interesting site. I invite you all to visit. It's a very good proof of climate adaptation that you and the Royal Society for Nature Conservation are doing on the site. Thank you. Now we will move to the question, and because we don't have interpretation, so me and Karen, we will manage French and English. So please feel free to ask your question in French. I will try to answer in French, and me and Karen, we will do both, okay? So without keep you waiting, we will move for the first question. Is from Jelena Dragovic from the National Park of Sakadar Lake in Montenegro. She's asking, how did you manage to resolve the impact of locals? Because she was explaining that they have problems, some issues because their wetland is private. So she's asking this question, and please, Karen or Hazem, you are both invited to answer.
Peut-être pour traduire la question, Sana, il faut peut-être dire.
Oui, bien sûr.
La question en français, tu veux aller, Sana? Et puis, maybe Hazem, you can answer very briefly. What do you do if the land is only private?
D'accord. Oui,
Sana, can you translate the question?
Oui, oui, oui. Donc, on a une question de Madame Elena Dragovic du Parc national Sakadar du Monténégro. Elle demande par rapport au plan d'aménagement de la zone humide, elle se demande comment les impacts des locaux et disons les conflits et les impacts des locaux ont été résolus dans votre management, dans les plans de gestion, car dans leur site, dans leur cas, la zone humide est une zone humide privée.
I don't know, Hazem, do you feel comfortable? Do you have any private lands around your wetlands area? I have an idea on how to respond, but
yeah,
you might be better suited to answer that. If just a very brief, as short as possible, because we need to translate your answer, please.
Of course, Karen, we have a lot of private lands around the wetland. So now the problem with the drilling illegal wells. And also we have legal and illegal wells. So in total, maybe more than 2,000 or from 1,500 to 2,000 legal and illegal wells. Now in Azraq area, and Azraq Basin. So this is, by the way, making the area saline now. The salinity is increasing significantly. Water, now we are testing the TDS, for example. So TDS, it was like 300.
Excuse me for interrupting, Hazim, but how are you managing this problem? So you
Now,
have the problem with the wells and saline. So what can you do, please?
with the salinity?
How are you managing the private land issue? How can you make them not do illegal things?
Yeah. We have now, we have two initiatives. Okay. The first initiative, it's the National Dialogue of Azraq Basin. Now we sit together with the farmers of the area and with the local people and also the decision makers. And we have another initiative which is called Highland Water Forum. So we are also working on the changing the mentality of the farmers in order to change their crops from water dependent crops to less consuming crops, like maybe, for example,
okay, that's okay. Let's stop there. Sorry for interrupting. We will allow Sana now to make the quick translation and then move to the next question. So it's a very good example, Hazim, but we need to keep it concise.
Okay. Yeah. Hazim, I will need your help because I thought that Karen will translate the answer,
okay,
and I will be translating the question. So if you... Ok, parfait, parce que je vais traduire les questions et les réponses, comme ça, je me concentre sur les questions.
Alors, ce qu'il a dit, je corrigerai parce que voilà, je peux dire des bêtises en français des fois. Ce qu'il a dit, Monsieur Hazim, c'est que dans leur cas, ils ont deux initiatives, surtout des dialogues. En fait, les problèmes essentiellement, c'est que là, les propriétaires privés, ils font des puits, ce qui rend les terres beaucoup plus salines. Donc, ils ont deux initiatives de dialogue avec les maraîchers, enfin les agriculteurs, avec la population locale et avec les preneurs de décision. Deuxièmement, ils ont un forum de l'eau où ils essaient de changer les mentalités pour que les agriculteurs changent leur cultivation pour qu'ils prennent moins d'eau. Voilà, pour traduire rapidement. Voilà. Donc, on va passer à la prochaine question.
C'est parfait. C'est parfait, c'est parfait. C'est une très, très bonne traduction, Karen. Donc, we will move to the question from Tushar Pradhan. I think it's the same question. Do you hear me? Okay, I think it's the same question. His question was, he was greeting you, Hazim, about the presentation, and he was saying, great to know about the Azraq wetland transformation and how the local communities were involved in the restoration project. So la question de Monsieur Tushar Pradhan, il dit que en fait, ça a été très intéressant d'entendre la présentation de Monsieur Hazim et que il se demandait aussi comment les communautés locales ont été impliquées dans le projet de restauration. I think that we already, Hazim and Karen already answered somehow to this question about local communities. So we can move to the question, the question that is, we have a question from Mr. Jibril Semakura. He was greeting everyone for the efforts toward the sustainable wetland use and management and the site that you presented. But he was asking, do we have guiding policies issued to all countries under the UNEP program? I think this question is for you, Karen. I will just translate it into French and then the floor is yours. So, Monsieur Jibril Semakura a félicité tout le monde pour les efforts de restauration et de développement durable dans leurs zones humides. Et il se demandait s'il y avait des guides, donc, qui ont été extraits de l'UNEP pour tous les pays qui sont concernés par le programme des Nations Unies pour l'environnement. Et je vous cède la parole.
Okay, I will just say briefly that So Jibril, thank you for the question. I also noted that you talked about the problem you're having with Lake Victoria and rice growing. We can come back to that. But UNEP has developed guidelines for how you can include disaster risk reduction into your wetlands management plans. Donc le PNUE, on vient de publier un document qui donne des idées, qui donne des idées, qui donne des principes pour guider votre travail dans l'inclusion des réductions des risques et catastrophes dans vos plans de gestion de votre zones humides. Voilà. So, however, for policies, this is something that the convention, the Ramsar Convention, has been working more on in terms of policies for changing government positions, right? And including wetlands. So there, I would rather that you take a look at the Ramsar Convention and their various policies that they have developed. So your question was not completely clear on that. But it's, I'm sorry to hear about the rice growing issues you're having there. This is where it's important that you do advocacy, right, with your governments for them to understand the importance of keeping wetlands conserved for reducing disaster risk and also for their co-benefits. So, je disais aussi, je suis désolée de voir qu'il y a des problèmes avec le lac Victoria en Ouganda, parce qu'ils parlent du fait qu'ils ont été convertis, les marécages ont été convertis pour la cultivation de riz. Et c'est là que c'est important de faire pression sur les gouvernements, pas uniquement au Ouganda, mais les gouvernements pour comprendre que les zones humides, les marécages sont importants dans le combat contre le changement climatique et la réduction des risques et catastrophes. Ça peut donner plus d'arguments et montrer les valeurs économiques, c'est important aussi. OK, Sana, back to you.
Oui, parfait. Donc, I will just ask you to please just write the question on the chat because we are receiving a lot of information, which is very good, but I'm not able to see the question. I will move to again a question from, or because we already have a question from Jablir Semakura, so I will give the floor to Stefan Amadou, who is raising his head. Can you please open the camera and introduce yourself, please?
And make a short question, very short question.
Yeah, short question, please. We don't have time.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I greet you all. Please, I would like to know if this wetland conservation project that is going on throughout the world, would they have some in Ghana here of which we can also engage?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to repeat your question again, Stephen, so that we can properly translate it. One more time.
I wanted to know, I said thank you for this opportunity given to me as a natural resource management student. Please, I would like to know this wetlands conservation project that is going on across the globe. Is there anything that they can do to Ghanaians who has available wetlands conservation areas?
In what country are you, Stephen?
I'm from Ghana.
Ghana. Okay.
Yeah.
So I understood that the question is if there are any wetlands management projects in Ghana. Stephen is a student in natural resource management, and I think he would like to be part of a wetlands management project in Ghana. Okay, so anybody in the chat, you can put your name. If you are from Ghana, then Stephen and you can connect. Là, c'était un jeune étudiant en Ghana qui veut travailler avec des managers, comment dire, des gérants des zones humides au Ghana. Voilà, donc on va faire la connexion là. Thank you, Stephen. Over to you.
You're
again.
welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Stefan. So I will move to the question from Deligo Samuel. And the question is, how do you handle risk assessment to identify the hazards and vulnerabilities specific to the wetland area? So in French, comment vous gérez l'évaluation des risques pour identifier ces vulnérabilités et ces impacts spécifiques dans la zone humide?
Okay, well, that is the top question of the day and a very tricky one for me to answer in a short amount of time. But I would really encourage you that you pick up the documents that we have developed. I don't know, Mikhail, if you can put the link to the wetlands and disaster risk reduction document in the link. But basically, one can do a hazard assessment first, where you look at what is the frequency, the history, the frequency, and the anticipated frequency and magnitude of the hazard, basically flooding or drought that is coming. OK, donc je disais juste que c'est une question assez compliquée à répondre en quelques mots, mais qu'on va mettre le lien à ce document de guide que nous avons publié, qui est uniquement en anglais, malheureusement. Ça vous donne plus de réponses, mais en gros, on peut travailler sur regarder les aléas, la fréquence et la magnitude des aléas, surtout les inondations et la sécheresse. Secondly, you can look at vulnerability, and you can define vulnerability in many different ways. I won't get into that. This I could talk about for an hour. And third, you can look at the exposure. In other words, how close are people living to the wetlands? So from my knowledge, there is not necessarily a specific way of measuring disaster risk that would be different for wetlands than it would be for flooding, for example. So you could use the same system that is used for looking at flooding. Donc, je disais juste que les deux autres parties du risque, c'est la vulnérabilité et l'exposition, mais qu'en fait, il n'y a pas vraiment une formule qui soit vraiment différente pour calculer le risque des catastrophes par rapport aussi aux inondations autour des rivières. Mais je vous conseille vivement de regarder notre guide et ça va vous donner plus d'informations. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. So we have another question from Tushar Pradhan. So he's asking, what future cascading risk do wetlands pose in wake of climate change impacts? Is there some anticipated risk? So, la question de Monsieur Tushar Pradhan, c'est peut-on anticiper en fait dans cette dynamique d'évaluation de risques, est-ce que peut-on évaluer et anticiper les risques dus au changement climatique?
Okay, should I take that question? I don't know, Hazim, if you have any experience with that, but basically what we have to look at is if we have any regional or even country level, let's say, forecasts of climate change and how it will impact your region or your country. It's called downscalable climate change impacts. So in other words, you'll need to do some research and see if you can find what the forecasts are for your country or for your region. And they will probably inform you that some parts of your country may receive more, are expected to receive more frequent and higher and extreme rainfall events, and some might receive less. So this is a very good question. It's important that you do a little bit of research. I cannot provide the answer for you because you're from all countries from the world, that you look into what is the climate forecasts for your specific areas. Donc, je disais juste que c'est une très bonne question et c'est à vous de chercher les informations qui existent souvent sur quels sont les pronostics attendus pour votre pays ou pour votre région. Est-ce que vous allez recevoir plus d'eau ou moins d'eau? Ça va vous permettre de regarder un petit peu en avant sur votre plan de gestion pour savoir comment gérer ça. Le manque d'eau ou trop d'eau. Anna?
Oui, merci Karen. Donc, we have the last question, and I'm sorry because we need to wrap up and we are running out of time. So we have a last question from Tigiyam Sati. And the question is, how can community engagement and local knowledge be effectively utilized in Wetland DRR initiative? Donc, la question, c'est comment l'engagement des acteurs et le savoir local peut être efficient et utilisé de manière efficace dans la gestion des risques des zones humides, dans les initiatives des zones humides.
Hazim, do you have any experience in your dialogues with the local people? Do they have some local knowledge that you have found very useful when you're doing the dialogue or the water forum that you would like to share in a very brief way, please?
Okay, so local community is a major part in any works in the wetland, in any even wetland restoration, wetland rehabilitation. So we established advisory committee of the people of Azraq, and also some other governmental institutions, governor, and other stakeholders in the area to share knowledge and also to give us some guidance. It's not binding, but we can learn from their experience, because the lessons learned of any wetland so depends on if it's successful or not. So it's the background of the local community.
Okay,
so
thank you.
They can give you a success or they can give you a failure.
Okay, thank you, sir. J'essaie de traduire, Sana.
Okay.
Monsieur Hassim m'a dit que en fait leur dialogue avec la population locale, c'est ça qui va faire si c'est une réussite ou si ça va échouer, et que vraiment ils prennent en compte la connaissance locale sur comment restaurer les zones humides, comment bien gérer les zones humides. Tout ça, ça vient des communautés, et que c'est très important de prendre en compte leurs avis et leur expertise. C'est pas forcément qu'ils vont tout suivre, hein. C'est pas forcément que c'est la loi qu'ils vont donner, mais que sans leur expertise, ça va soit plomber, soit ça va marcher, votre plan de restauration et gestion des zones humides. Je te redonne la parole, Sana. Thank you.
D'accord. Merci, Karen. Thank you, Hazem. Shukran. I think we need to stop, otherwise we will spend days and days talking on this very interesting topic. I would like to thank you all. I don't know, Karen and Hazem, if you want to say something to close the session, any words, any feelings?
Well, perhaps we can hand over to Flo for a few last words, but I was very happy to be part of this dialogue. Merci beaucoup pour cette opportunité de partager quelques idées là-dessus. Et on donne la parole à Madame Flore Lafay de Ramsar Convention, la convention de Ramsar. Merci.
Oui, merci beaucoup Karen, Sana et Hazim, parce que le webinaire a été vraiment extrêmement intéressant. I will speak in English just afterwards, but I'd start in French. Simplement pour dire, je pense que ce cas de Azraq Reserve, le cas de cette réserve à Azraq est vraiment incroyable pour montrer à la fois la réaction qui a été menée face à une situation de sécheresse et qui a ensuite emmené toute la communauté locale et les décideurs vers la mise en œuvre de solutions dans des tas de directions sur la restauration des milieux, sur la réintroduction d'espèces endémiques, mais aussi jusqu'à l'écotourisme et à des bénéfices socio-économiques pour les populations. Donc, je trouve que c'était un exemple particulièrement fascinant. I just moved to English. I wanted to say that I would like to thank Karen, Suna, and Mr. Hazim for the wonderful presentations, and to say that the Azraq Reserve case is a really fascinating example of a move that was initially designed to respond to a drought issue in 1991, and then finally brought all the communities, local communities, policymakers, and site managers to bring and to expand benefits from wetlands to whole in many dimensions, from biodiversity as a reintroduction of endemic species, of fish species, to socio-economical benefits like ecotourism. So thanks you all for your attention, and I'll give back the floor to Sana. Thank you.
Thank you, Fleur. I am personally impressed by the interpretation skills of our guest today. So you were easily speaking French and English, and really, I'm really thankful for you. I really want to thank you, UNEP. I want to thank the Ramsar Convention. I want to thank the RSEN and Mr. Hazem. It was a very interesting webinar. I will give the final word to Mr. Alessio, who is with us now. The floor.
Yeah, sorry for but
and I will ask you to translate into French also. Okay. I know you speak French.
Sana, just before we leave, Alessio, we have to remind people to please take the final quiz.
Yes.
And they will receive a UNEP certificate. It's very important also for the donor.
Thank you, Karen.
Do us a favor and help us with our donor and our statistics, and it will only take you like 3 minutes, and you will receive a UNEP certificate.
So yes, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. You have
il faut juste que vous complétez le petit sondage et vous allez recevoir un certificat de PNUE. Désolée d'avoir interrompu. Voilà, merci.
Parfait, merci.
Thank you, Karen. So, but finally, I don't have many things to add. Just thank you very much to everybody, and also to say that it's just the beginning, of course, that what we hope a long-term collaboration. We will explore more issues to discuss and to see together, and to see how we can learn together for better management and conservation of wetlands, but also how wetlands can play their role as nature-based solutions. So, merci beaucoup à tout le monde et à la prochaine. À bientôt.
À très bientôt tout le monde. Merci.
Ciao.